Alright guys, so I did want to talk about some tokusatsu here today, since recently we did get the unfortunate news that after 50 years, the Super Sentai series is finally coming to a close at the end of this year, early next year, whenever the current season of Gojuger is ending. That's going to be all she wrote for Super Sentai, which I've been a Super Sentai fan for many years now, of course, as many people starting out as a Power Ranger fan. Of course, growing up, my two main franchises, IPs, however you want to refer to them, were always Power Rangers and Pokemon. And both those IPs are just in just abysmal condition right now, which is depressing. But yeah, some of my earliest memories involve, sitting on the floor in front of the TV watching Power Rangers. And I loved that show all growing up. And eventually, of course, when I got older, that led me to discovering Super Sentai and Kamen Rider and, sort of going from there into other realms of the toku genre. So it really makes me sad to hear that Super Sentai is ending after all this time. Now, I know it's had some issues over the last several years. When I first heard rumors about how Gojuger might be the last season, I didn't take it seriously at all because we get rumors almost every fucking year that Sentai is ending. And I thought this was just going to be another one of those cases. But this time it is true, they have confirmed it. And I know for several years now, the ratings and the toy sales for Sentai have paled in comparison to Kamen Rider, which of course is also made by Toei, and I believe Ultraman as well, which is made by a different company, but still. So, as far as why this is happening, I'm sure there's a multitude of factors. I know a lot of people have been speculating about, the Power Ranger side with Hasbro getting full rights to Power Rangers, maybe that having some sort of impact on this. Which we did actually recently get an interview with one of the producers from Toei talking about, why this is happening. And he mentioned several things as well, and he did mention that, Hasbro getting the full rights to the toys did impact like their yearly reports, since the yearly numbers for Sentai did include the global sales numbers for Power Rangers elsewhere for Bandai. And with Bandai losing that toy license and it going to Hasbro, that did drastically decrease those numbers and put Sentai even further behind, Rider and Ultraman and whatever. So, was that the only factor? I highly doubt it, but I definitely think it was at least a contributing factor to this decision, which the current state of the Power Rangers franchise is just absolutely awful. I know people say that ain't totally dead. Maybe not, but I would consider it dead. If it's not dead, it's absolutely on life support. The show ended with Cosmic Fury in 2023, and that ended a continuity that had lasted for 30 years in its own right. And I know that there's been talk about how there's going to be a reboot, and they've been talking about that for years now. We haven't really gotten anything out of it. I know recently they talked about how Disney Plus is involved now, of all fucking people. Which, I will say that the best era of Power Rangers definitely was the Disney era, from Ninja Storm up through RPM. But I absolutely do not want the Disney of today getting anywhere near this franchise. So, if that ever sees the light of day, which I'm not even convinced that it will, but even if it does, I have zero faith in this reboot being anything worth a damn. I just recently saw something about how some of the producers or whatever from that Percy Jackson show might be involved. And I know absolutely jack shit about Percy Jackson, so that doesn't really mean anything to me one way or another. But the Power Ranger show is effectively dead. It might get rebooted in the future in some form, maybe. But even if it does, it's obviously not going to be the same. It's going to be a new continuity. So Power Rangers as we know it, at least, is dead. I know they're doing the whole reignition thing where they're like remastering Mighty Morphin and they outsource the fucking toys to Playmates. Like, Hasbro is a toy company, and they won't even make toys for their own fucking franchises anymore. So, the entire thing on the Western Power Ranger side is entirely a shit show. And my cope for that whole thing was at least I'd still have Super Sentai to fall back on. And now, sadly, that is going the way of the dinosaur as well. So, I'm definitely going to miss Super Sentai. I always enjoy the show to one degree or another. Of course, it gets sort of soft rebooted every year, so some seasons, of course, resonate more with me than others. But I always get a kick out of watching it. When Toei is replacing that time slot with a new project or franchise or whatever you want to call it. But they got a new thing that they're coming out with called Project R.E.D, which I guess is going to be a collection of new Toku shows that are kind of filling the void left by Super Sentai. The first of which is actually going to be a new show called Super Space Sheriff Gavin Infinity, which is going to be a revival of the old Space Sheriff series from the Metal Heroes franchise, which is another defunct property from Toei. Which, as for me personally, I don't have a ton of experience with Metal Heroes. I haven't sat down and watched any of the full shows from any of those series. My only real experience with anything Space Sheriff or Metal Hero related, outside of like the random, crossovers and cameo appearances and random Rider or Sentai shows or movies or whatever. My only other real experience with that is watching the Big Bad Beetleborgs from back in the day. Which, I want somebody to bring that shit back. What happened to fucking Big Bad Beetleborgs? Let's reboot that. You want to reboot every fucking thing. But yeah, I have little to no experience with the Metal Hero series. I did see a little bit of the previews and stuff they've been showing for Gavin Infinity. And I will be checking out the show. The suit looks cool, at least. Obviously, we don't know a ton about it right now, so we don't know how good it's going to be. But I'm willing to give it a chance, and hopefully it'll be good. But, definitely it's not going to be the same as Super Sentai. Which, with this whole Project R.E.D thing being sort of undefined, you can't rule out the fact that maybe some future series as a part of Project R.E.D will either be really similar to Sentai, or maybe sort of like a spiritual successor to it in some way, where we get maybe some sort of like team-based hero show to fit in with that. So that's definitely a possibility. I know in that interview I mentioned earlier, that one Toei producer did talk about how, maybe the show needs to go away for a while to kind of have a chance to breathe and then maybe come back like 10 years down the road or something. Which, obviously a million different things can happen between now and 10 years from now. So that sort of statement doesn't really put a lot of faith in me about, it coming back at any point. But, you can never say never. There was a long period when Kamen Rider wasn't airing any new shows or anything, and then it came back in, what year was that, 2000, with Kuga in the Heisei era. So maybe Sentai sometime down the road will have a revival like Kamen Rider did with Kuga, and we get a big triumphant return, and, they start back with the yearly shows or whatever. But I definitely wouldn't be holding my breath for that. So, yeah, this hits hard for me, especially with, Power Rangers already being in the dustbin, basically. Losing out on Super Sentai on top of that is definitely a hard blow for me. Fortunately, we still have Kamen Rider, and it looks like, they're really pushing harder with the Western expansion of Kamen Rider, with the current season's 8 being, simulcast worldwide, officially for the first time. So they do seem to be pushing harder in the rest of the world with that IP. Which, again, Hasbro owning the international rights to Sentai may have had some factor with that, since they couldn't push Super Sentai internationally as hard as they are Rider because of legalese rights nonsense. That could have been definitely a contributing factor to why all this is happening. But yeah, we have Rider to keep us going, and whatever this new Project R.E.D ends up being, starting with Space Sheriff and then going beyond that, God knows what. So whatever the future holds, we're not going to be starved for Toku content in general. And at least for me personally, I have several Sentai seasons that are, really old that I've never got to see in the first place. So I guess now I got a chance to go back and check all those out as well. But yeah, RIP to Super Sentai. It's always a big shame when these huge, long running, beloved franchise like this comes to a close. So I hate to see it go, but there isn't really anything we can do. So anyway, I guess that's all I got to say, so lots of luck to you and yours.